Computer games have never been easier to create. One-person development studios are creating hits like Phasmophobia. Anyone can turn their Xbox Series X into a development console, and basically anyone has access to the Unity and Unreal Engine that's basically free for most indies. However, the same cannot be said of the 5th generation consoles, where people had to incorporate as a company, hire about a dozen employees, and most importantly create their own 3D game engine, keeping in mind that these employees have never seen a polygon in their life up until that point. Let's have a look at the graveyard of unfinished PlayStation 1 games that never saw the light of day. Actually, 50 of them, and I'm only scratching the surface. These are titles I handpicked because I was genuinely interested in them, and mostly because we have old video footage. If you want to see even more unreleased games, because I only took about 20% of the options, Unseen64.net is a really great place to start, and is the main reason why I'm able to make the video, due to their awesome community of game preservationists and researchers. Also, 10 of these cancelled 50 games are actually playable now. There are chapter times down below to that section if you just want to skip, but for those who decide to watch this enormous gigantic length video, surprise! There are even more cancelled games that are playable, but I don't count them because they're mostly more like tech demos, or in one scenario, they're just playable pitches from companies looking to get the publisher's contract. The main reason why I wanted to make this video is that some of the reasons why games get cancelled is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, a lot of excuses for the games here are publishers dropping out or companies running out of money, but there are some crazy outliers, and I'm looking at you, Glover 2 and Hasbro, who published that game. I'm going to break it down by genre, so let's get started with action adventure. The contract by Psygnosis Manchester was cancelled as the studio shut down halfway through production. This action game was a third-person adventure where you could select to be male or female mob henchmen character Simon and Natasha. The game had 30 undercover missions, which varied depending on which character you chose, along with 50 different weapons you could kill your enemies with, along with 20 stealth moves. This game got pretty far into development, halfway, and video footage does exist online. So I actually reached out to one of the developers of the contract, Scotty, who was the senior animator on the project. And I reached out to him in the most professional way possible, Instagram. So Scott Plater Pierce was a senior animator on the project, and he felt that it was going to be shaping up to be an awesome game, very dark and realistic. For him as the senior animator, it was a learning experience, as he wanted to balance all the movements of the animation that the main character would have, along with the instant reaction needed by the game engine and the player. They even had an ex-SAS soldier come in, Andy McNabb, to show the studio some moves, like how to slit someone's throat properly, and well, he had a very interesting experience from that. So that was the lead animator's reflection on the project, the contract, and let's just jump back to the main video. Army Men Battle Brats by 3DO is another title in the Army Men franchise, which I surprisingly covered quite a bit on this channel with Sarge's Hero 2 and my full Let's Play for Portal Runner. Featuring kid soldiers, I never got further than some character concept art and the game's opening cutscene, which frankly is the best part of playing any Army Men game, if you saw my previous videos. Spanish Blood was going to be a PS1 adventure game developed by Scavenger. Not much is known about the game, but these pictures were from a press kit at E3 in 1996, where we can only assume it was going to be a 32-bit version of Sea of Thieves, complete with polygon and memory limitations. The development company Scavenger eventually closed down as they had too many projects in development at the time, including X-Men. Saboteur was an action game in development around 1998 and 1999 that was cancelled by the Tomb Raider publisher Eidos Interactive. This also would have been a game I really would have liked to have played, as you can have a companion with a dog Shiro. You can command him to attack enemies, retrieve objects, or solve puzzles. You play as protagonist Shin Legana, who's trying to avenge the death of your father Shenmue style, because no creativity exists in video games. Now, like Tomb Raider, this would have been third person with action and puzzle solving, but what's really puzzling to me is Eidos' decision to cancel it. Now, they claim it was because with the PS2 on the way, they were worried about low sales since it would have been PS1 software, but this game was in development for 3 years and only 6 months away from publishing. How does that happen? How low could sales have been that you pay a game studio 3 years of operating costs and not try to make back some of your investment? This wouldn't happen in film, which is something I'm much more familiar with, so I don't financially know how this was a good idea for a video game project. Like, why would you cancel that when you're so close to finishing it and it took such a long time to make it? The Fallen by Sensory Deception was an action-adventure game that was cancelled but had ambitions to be a futuristic technical marvel that would have bet Rockstar to the punch with Grand Theft Auto 3. With non-linear play and an array of vehicles and weapons to use on a large open map, this ambitious title was cancelled around 1996. So I reached out to Dave Antony, lead programmer, creator and writer on The Fallen, and while he had no new assets to share, he apparently did a Q&A with another organisation, and while I was unable to find the interview, I googled some quotes from the interview. I'm going to share it as he had shared the document with me. I'm going to talk you through the highlights of the interview, but feel free to pause the video and read it as each page appears on screen. The project originated when he had pitched his idea of The Fallen to the owner of Psygnosis, Ian Hetherington, and got a job contract and some funding to make it. It began on the PC for development and was eventually ported to the PlayStation when he was told to make it in 3D. Having no experience in 3D, he struggled creating the engine like so many others in this video, and what they ended up with was a basic world where you could drive vehicles, shoot people, enter stores and do basic trade. The game would have also had a conversation system where you could talk with NPCs, and one scenario was observing a murder and either reporting it to the police, chasing the killer, or doing nothing. The game was cancelled 2.5 years after he first got funding for it. While we never got this open world PS1 game, they actually do exist. In fact, on my channel I just began a let's play of one open world game. It's a detective mystery game called Mizurna Falls, so go ahead and check that out after this video if you are interested in open world PS1 games. The Incredible Shrinking Character by GoGo Interactive Studios would have been published by Cyberdreams in 1996. This plot involves a crazy doctor that would have shrunken you, the protagonist, with experimental poison. Set in 1959, your mission is to rescue a missing woman named Julie, but in your shrunken state, there's the added challenge of not being eaten by the house cat or other enemies like roaches and ants and bats that were in the house. Which must have been owned by Dracula, because why else would your house have vermin like that? Surprise! A playable demo for this game does exist, but I don't count it as one you can officially play because it's a tech demo, but it does exist. It can be found on the Trusty Archive website and there's a link in the description below. Popcorn Short Fuses was an action-adventure developed by ex-Rare employees 8 Wonder in 1997 and 1998. Rare is famous for their Nintendo 64 titles like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. These ex-employees created a new company funded by Sony, and Popcorn Short Fuses was a platforming adventure game that would have played like 3D Bomberman. The game would have 6 world themes with 3 levels each, along with 10 playable characters and high-resolution graphics. Sunsoft planned to publish it, but internal issues at the development company led to the cancellation of this title. According to an employee, the game was only 3 months away from hitting its gold master. You should have held out just a little bit longer. Again, return on investment. You're throwing money down the drain by not trying to get back some of the money. Wait, does that make sense? Onimusha by Capcom. This is a franchise that is known for beginning on the PlayStation 2. However, the first game was originally developed for the PS1 on the Resident Evil 2 game engine. Development of the game got to about 50% complete before it was scrapped and started again on the PlayStation 2. The plot is the same as the PS2 version, and therefore the levels and missions are all the same. All that's really different is the tech, so it's not too much of a loss. This really is a Shenmue situation that started out on the Sega Saturn before moving to the Dreamcast. Alcatraz Escape from the Rock was a cancelled adventure game, and there is very little known about this game. Drop a comment down below if you have any more details, as I got nothing, even from Googling. All I can tell you is me doing commentary on a prototype cutscene for the game, and to me, it seems more like a horror title, but that might be just because of the rendering of the prison. And I can tell you that the mission of the game was probably escaping from said prison. Too Human is an Xbox 360 game, but did you know it actually began as a PS1 game by Silicon Knights? Shown at E3 in 1999 with acclaim due to its gorgeous graphics and innovative gameplay, the studio was eventually bought by Nintendo, with rumours of becoming a GameCube game before being bought by Microsoft in 2005, resulting in the 360 release of a very different game in 2008. For the PS1 version, this game would have had no loading screens, building upon the tech of Legacy of Kain. Scheduled for a summer 2000 release, this game would have been packed on 4 CDs for the PS1, as this game contained hours of FMV movies, a technical marvel that unfortunately never saw the light of day. Ghost Rider. Based on the comic book series, which is such a weird thing to say as we usually say movies or television show, but this game was apparently being developed by Neversoft Entertainment for Crystal Dynamics publishing the title before it was cancelled. Apparently they felt the game needed to be true 3D like Gex. If it makes you feel better, the video footage you're watching is a tech demo, as the game never even reached alpha stages, although it did use AI to generate the fire, so there was never a pattern. And finally, we have Covert Wars, cancelled early '98 by Playmates. Not much is known about this shooter game other than a company called Black Ops developing it, and multiplayer being a pretty big focus point. If you have worked on this game or have any additional information about this relic, do drop a comment down below and spill some tea. Onto the shooter genre, I'm hitting this off with Unreal, and more specifically the Unreal PS1 port. The popular PC game by Epic Games had PS1 ambitions, and developer Pterodactyl Software, that was a hard name, was tasked with doing so by adding exclusive levels and weapons. And surprise, you can play the exclusive maps from the port on the PC version of Unreal, as a community member from the Beyond Unreal community reached out to a developer of the port who shared the maps. These maps can be played, and players will notice differences between the PC and PS1 version. Since the PS1 version was less powerful, maps had to be less combat focused and more puzzle focused. And to avoid large-scale combat, emphasis was placed on the platforming with jumping puzzles. These levels are also difficult, as they are designed to be completed later on in the game, so it's not the tutorial level that you're going to be playing. Big Guns, also known as Exodus, is a cancelled shooter action game that was in development by Neversoft Entertainment in 1996 and 1997. The developers made a tech demo primarily to show off their 3D game engine and to get the contract for the PC game MDK, who was looking to get a PS1 port made. They did get the port, and the tech demo was sold to Sony. The game apparently changed from a mech shooter to a weird action adventure featuring a cat girl, but the project was eventually cancelled. Thankfully, the developers got a lifeboat in Activision, and the 3D engine they developed for this game wouldn't just be used on MDK, but also on Apocalypse. Dreadnought, also known as HMS Carnage, is a cancelled Victorian steampunk shooter set on the red planet of Mars that was in development for almost 3 years by the Tribe team at Ocean Software. Shown at E3 in 1996, the player in the game is able to use ground and air vehicles, turrets, and on-foot weapons to kill their enemies and complete the mission objectives. The game would have also featured live-action FMV movies, so a huge shout out to the contributors at Unseen64 for preserving and providing details about this title, because it's a hard one to find. Monstrous City is a cancelled action game that was in development by North Star Studios for the PlayStation. Now, this isn't really a shooter game, but it's kind of in the same vein. You play as monsters and kill people, destruction. They're really cousins at the end of the day, close cousins. It would have had a Godzilla-like creature, a huge robot, and apparently an occult Dracula-style monster. The project was never finished and not much more is known about the game beyond one article, but I included it in the video because I love SimCity and you can obviously destroy cities, and I felt that that was somewhat similar. Also cousins, but definitely more distant cousins. Why am I talking about cousins? Cancelled Tomb Raider knockoffs. This is my spin-off category because a huge trend I noticed in the cancelled PlayStation 1 games graveyard was the amount of action-adventure games that were trying to beat a Tomb Raider killer by making a better adventure game. And well, you do not mess with the Croft. We begin with Aqua Prophecy by ASCII, a game trying to take on Tomb Raider. This one is best described as Tomb Raider but underwater. Except Tomb Raider had underwater gameplay, so it's more like Tomb Raider but without the land. And they thought that would be the selling point of the game. Another game, The Island of Dr. Moreau, planned to take on Tomb Raider by venturing into Indiana Jones territory in this 3-disc game by Haiku Studios. With a mix of live-action FMV, the scale and scope of Myst, with the action of Tomb Raider, this was cancelled late into development for unknown reasons. There's also a hint of Shenmue here in that apparently the programmers managed to code the NPCs to have a clock system of being in a certain place at a certain time. A schedule, if you will. Impressive enough for a 32-bit system, but perhaps that was the issue. Terminus by Scavenger was also another action-adventure game that went on the record of trying to give our girl Lara a run for her money, but unfortunately this game was cancelled too. Not too much is known about this title except that the characters were actually sprites in a 3D environment, as they thought that would give you higher quality character models. Unfortunately, the technology meant you could never get close to the characters and see the high quality detail they designed, kind of like Donkey Kong. Allegiance by Team 17 for the PS1 and Saturn and 3DO. Development began around 1995 and 1996, and this action-adventure title was going to be a first-person shooter featuring a female character. However, they had issues with developing the 3D engine. It was also going to feature live-action FMV. One developer was quoted as saying that after the success of Tomb Raider, they were going to try and pivot it from being basically Perfect Dark to Tomb Raider, but because the development company had a reputation of making original games and not derivatives, they eventually cancelled the project. Horror games. There's actually not too many horror games here, but I think that's because publishers know that horror games sell well, but let's begin. Resident Evil wasn't going to be the only fixed cam pre-rendered background 32-bit game of the 90s, as we see here with Justice for Hire, a cancelled PS1 game by Big Ape Productions. Judging by the art style, it was going to have an urban setting in a derelict apartment building with horror and puzzle gameplay similar again to Resident Evil and Fear Effect. Dead Unity by Aramat Productions, published by THQ. Not much is known about this game, except it would have played like Resident Evil, but in a sci-fi setting with robots and mechanical enemies. The game was supposed to be released in October 1998, but was cancelled for unknown reasons. If you have any more information about this game or you worked on it, drop a comment down below. And then finally, Tarantula was the game being developed by Scavenger for the PS1 and Sega Saturn before being cancelled. Now, it's described as an action game, but I'm putting it in horror because you play as a freaking spider. This was shown at E3 in 1996, where apparently you play as the spider and go around nature and people's houses. That is the scariest thing I've ever heard. Automatic 18+ age rating right there. Also, the pre-rendered backgrounds do look very Resident Evil-y, but I just want to move on. I'm moving on from this game. Fighting games. Not too many on the list here, but let's begin. Chi-Yong was a cancelled fighting game by Lightspeed Productions and was going to be a 4-player combat arcade fighter, basically a Mortal Kombat clone. Pay particular attention to the fact that they were going to digitize the actors. Sorcery is a cancelled fighting game that was being developed in-house at Sony. Players would have been able to choose their fighter, which was a fantasy character with unique moves and being able to cast magic on their opponents. Now, apparently the developer's first idea for this game was to be a huge sprawling RPG with quests and a ton of NPCs, but due to the budget and the PS1 being a 32-bit system, it was scaled down to being an arena fighter. Unfortunately, since the developers didn't know how to make a fighting game, the project was eventually cancelled. What a winding road for that game. Also, I probably would have really liked this game. Have you seen the character design and how camp it is? Sony, you left money on the table by not finishing this one. Gen 13. Based on the comic book, this entry is a really interesting one for those who want to learn about how the industry works, particularly on developing games with IPs. Thanks to the folks at PlayStation Museum who were able to find various game company pitches, that is where a game developer pitches their idea to a publisher with a tech demo along with a financial bid. We can make this type of game for that amount of money. Do you get me? Not many people know that for certain games and movies, a lot of it is based on bidding. For example, to do visual effects for a film. So here what we can see is the various types of game that would have been along with what was chosen before the game was cancelled. What is really interesting is that one of these tech demos is available for download and to be run on the PS1. So a huge thanks to the PlayStation Museum, Unseen64 and the Games at Word blog for documenting all of this when it comes to Gen 13. Space games. Moving away from 2D games when Space Invaders was super hot and even featured in Namco's Tekken, we begin with another Namco title, Commando. Taking place on Mars in 3D environments filled full of enemies and being equipped with a jetpack to basically take the phrase flight or fight to a whole new level.
Affirmative, please stand by. Roger.
Bioswarm by Cyclone Studios. Described by the poster on Unseen64 as Rocket League meets Quake, this is another cancelled title that would have basically saw Space Invaders expand to have 3D graphics and additional gameplay mechanics. This was also planned on being developed for the N64 and 3DO Hardware, who we all know only too well on this channel from covering Army Man and Portal Runner. Farstar by Technocrest was going to be, you guessed it, another Space Invaders style game, although the actual game developer who preserved the video described it more of a mix of Wing Commander and Star Trek. They claimed they weren't talented enough to program the game and it was too ambitious for the time period. Now, don't be too hard on yourself. This is actually another reason why I wanted to make this video, because back then everybody had to code their own 3D game engine. There was no Unity or Unreal. And now with all these cancelled games, there's just a whole graveyard of floating 3D engines in cyberspace. Playable cancelled games. Now to the category that you guys and girls have been most excited about, cancelled games that you can actually play because they were leaked online. Let's get started with the obligatory mention for the newbies out there. Thrillkill. This was a fully complete but cancelled game because it was too violent, and it's a 4-player fighting game and it's out there for you on the internet to play with. So many videos on YouTube cover this game and I want to show some more love to the cancelled obscure games in this list. Likewise, Superman for PS1 by Titus Entertainment was cancelled because the lighting ran out, but the game was finished. And what more can I say? It's Superman on PS1. It's a third-person action adventure game, so of course it's gonna play like Tomb Raider. What game didn't back in the day? This game can be downloaded online quite easily to be played on your PS1, and it's worth playing if you're a DC fan. Enjoy!
Just in time.
The Dream Team Basketball Playable Beta. All I know is that Shaquille O'Neal is in this game and this was cancelled while it was in beta, and you can play as all the members on the American 1996 basketball team. I don't know anything about American basketball, so I can't say much more, but enjoy this footage. And if you are a sports game fan, it's out there on the internet for you to download and enjoy. Literally all I know about American basketball is Shaquille O'Neal, and he was in Fresh Off the Boat, which was such a good show. But that's a completely different topic. Jet Moto 4 2124. With 16 playable tracks and cool hover bikes, this unreleased cancelled game was found by the folks over at Jet Moto Central, if you're a fan of the franchise, which is the only place where you can download it. What's really cool is that concept designer Sid Mead, who did Blade Runner and Aliens, designed some of the maps on this cancelled game, according to BJ Willard on Unseen64. I actually downloaded and played this game, and it is quite fun, but that's probably why Jet Moto is a franchise after all. Razor Wing by Space is a cancelled flying shooter game that was developed around 1995. And in 2017, a playable development version was found. Hooray! This game features technology that was innovative for the time and used in a lot of modern games today, like a streaming engine and high-resolution graphics. Unseen64 user Monokoma believes the project was cancelled because it was too similar to the other Sony racing game Warhawk, which hit the market first. You can find more information about the project and find the playable ISO at Unseen64. Glover 2 by Interactive Studios Limited. This is a sequel to the 1998 platformer that was released for the PS1 and the Nintendo 64. Plans for a sequel were well underway, but get this, the game was bizarrely cancelled because the first game was so popular. It sold 150,000 units on the Nintendo 64, which for a not very popular console at the time was considered a success. Also because non-Nintendo games didn't really sell that well on N64. So let me break it down. The folks at Hasbro thought the only logical thing to do here in this situation was to order 300,000 more units of the first game. They were only able to sell half the stock, with retailers saying there wasn't enough demand to push the other stock out, and so they were left with like 150,000 units of Glover 1 that they couldn't sell off. Now, because of this, the game franchise became a black sheep inside of the publishing company, and so they cancelled it. Fortunately for you, playable prototypes do exist for Nintendo 64, but I am giving you a free game, so even though this is a PS1 video, it's a free game, goddammit. And it was supposed to come out on PS1, so close enough. The folks at Origami64 have patched the playable prototype, making it more playable. Link in the description below. Titan AE is a cancelled action game based off the 2000 sci-fi movie with the same name. Once the film became a box office bust, the publisher felt they were better off not putting any more money into it and cancelled the project. Eventually, a one-level demo got leaked online, and using some GameShark codes, you can actually boot into the debug menu and play even more levels from the cancelled game. With similar gameplay to Tomb Raider, it's time to brush up on your tank controls and download this cancelled title. The video has a link to Titan AE, and that is a great place to start. I do not, however, offer any technical support for cancelled PS1 games, which is very niche. You could probably make a lot of money if, you know, rich people spent their time playing cancelled PS1 games. Aeon Flux was a cancelled PS1 game based off the anime and before the Charlize Theron film that was being developed by Cairo Interactive for publishing by Virgin Interactive. Virgin would merge with Viacom, leading to the cancellation of all the publishers' games, and the developer Cairo didn't have the rights for the Aeon Flux property, it was with Virgin. The game was stripped of all references and released under a different name as Pax Corpus in Europe, and it retains the same plot line and even female character dressed in purple. However, a prototype of the game leaked onto the internet in 2019 and includes 7 playable levels from the second mission. Huge thanks to Cult of Osiris for leaking the build, and it can be found online by googling, but I'm not getting sued by Charlize Theron, so no links here except for a very informative article by Unseen64. When you are playing the prototype build, some areas aren't complete and require you turning off collision to proceed. The Hidden Palace community, which is basically all about preserving games, has both more information on how to play the build, and yes, a link to download it. Okay, I basically gave you the answer. Please don't sue me, Charlize Theron. I love your work and everything that you do, Yeah, don't sue me. Also, the levels are so similar to the release game Pax Corpus that you can even use the walkthrough for that game to get you through this game. Star Control 4 was a cancelled entry in the Star Control franchise made famous by the Amiga and PC release in 1990. The PS1 version was cancelled as it was reported the game had serious deficiencies. Now, we don't know when development began, but we do know it was cancelled around October 1998. For those of you who know your Star Control franchise, not me, this is all research, the Eureka, whatever that is, would have returned as the alien race, and apparently the game would have played like a shooting-orientated X-Wing. Yes, if you're a fan of the franchise, a playable beta is available. Parasite. This adventure game for the PS1 was cancelled, but surprise, the game was actually released for PC under a completely different name, Arcritz the Intruder. This side-scroller was in development by Virtual Studio, and the PS1 game was cancelled for unknown reasons. But with a PC release, certainly all was not lost. The original concept for the game was a film noir thriller with a twist, but I mean, all thrillers have twists, so... Anyways, you play an ordinary guy possessed by an alien, and you have to find a cure before he shapeshifts into basically an alien. To play the game on PC, you will need a DOS emulator to begin your adventure. I just want to know how this alien DNA got inside of a beer which your character named Jack drinks. Like, really. At least the side-scrolling pre-rendered backgrounds are pretty. These are the only games that I know of that were cancelled but had solid builds leaked online. If you know of any other PS1 titles, do let me and others know in the comments down below. Racing games. I'm out of cancelled games you can play, but moving on to racing games, we begin with Konami Racer. Konami Racer by Konami was cancelled, only shown at E3. But it's a car game. What more can I possibly add? Just, sit back and enjoy the footage, please. Test Drive Cycles by Accolade Studios. This motorbike racing game was in development for the PS1 in 1998 and 1999, also a Dreamcast version that was also cancelled. This run-of-the-mill motorbike racer might have brought variety to the genre that had a behemoth at the time in Gran Turismo. A PC and strangely enough Game Boy version was released in the year 2000. Propaganda by Burst and Virgin Interactive. This is a mission-based racer game similar enough to 007 Racing for the PS1, set in a world where Eastern Europe never lost power. What's really interesting is that it was going to implement a live-action video and blend in the vehicles with it to give it unprecedented graphics, and enemy vehicles would have been stacked full of retro weapons for combat variety. RPGs. Not too many RPGs were cancelled for the PS1. Most in late PS1 development moved to PS2, but let's begin. TwinBee Miracle was a 2D turn-based RPG. All we know about it so far was that it was going to be scheduled to be released on the PlayStation 1 in 1996 for the 10th year anniversary of TwinBee. A TwinBee RPG though did get released in Japan in 1998, but it was a completely different game.
ポップなイメージに仕上がった。ツインビーならではの楽しい仕掛けがいっぱいだ。
Vanished Power by Neon Software. This was going to be a point-and-click action-adventure RPG title in isometric views like The Sims 1. There is not much information online about this game, so if you do know anything, drop a comment down below. Witchwood 1995 by Team 17. This was another title being developed between 1994 and 1996. Similar to The Legend of Zelda, this game was cancelled by the publisher after another title by Team 17, Sphere's Legacy, flopped upon release, and the publisher wanted to reduce their risk on another title by the team. An action-adventure at heart, like Zelda, it would feature RPG puzzles, and the plot was apparently your typical evil witch casts a spell on a small village and only you can save them sort of thing. Like every other RPG. College Humor, by the way, did a really funny skit about this. You should check that out. Surprise! This one is also playable. The reason why I didn't count this one on my list is because all we have is a tech demo, but a PC tech demo does exist. It runs on DOS, so you will need a DOS emulator, which I cannot help you set up. And it is silent, there is no sound, but you can play around on the map and see the vision that the folks at Team 17 had for this game. It's very Zelda. There's a link in the description to archive.org which has the tech demo. Eternal Chain is an RPG that was being developed by Victor Interactive Software in 1998 and 1999. The game was cancelled for unknown reasons, but I mostly included this entry because the only surviving footage we have of this game is wonky handycam camera footage that was recorded at the Tokyo Game Show both in 1998 and 1999. We do have some more clear concept art from this turn-based RPG, and the character design was created by Range Murata. Also, at the very least, the storyline for this game was original, no cursed villages here. As the plot goes, 16,000 years ago, humans lived on Mars. After using up the resources of Mars, the humans started moving to Earth. At that time, another life form, gods, inhabited the Earth. After the humans settled on Earth, they eventually split into two groups, those who liked the gods and those who disliked the gods. It was only a matter of time before battles between gods and the two groups of humans began. According to Unseen64, by the way, this has not been fact-checked out thoroughly. Oh boy, I wonder if the people working on this game are alive now, because we do certainly wish we were all living on Mars, currently. And our final category for the video is platformers. And if you can't tell already, my voice is dying because I've been narrating this for over an hour straight. Pac-Man Ghost Zone. Pac-Man was going to take on Mario with their own version of Mario 64 with Pac-Man Ghost Zone by Namco. The game was cancelled by the developers because ultimately it never felt like Pac-Man to them. PlayStation Museum, who recovered the lost footage, which I believe they recorded, so they may actually have like a beta or an alpha of the game, release it, said it was modelled after Super Mario 64 but played more like Tomb Raider 1. Yo-Yo by Magic Art Studio. So this is the entry and the cancelled game that I'd personally like to play the most. A cancelled platformer in the vein of Spyro. Here you play as a monkey and platform around the Middle Eastern environments, and as a huge fan of Aladdin by Disney, this is a game I would have been obsessed with. According to a developer who worked on the game, it was cancelled one day after the release of Spyro 2 because Sony felt the game wouldn't be able to compete. And you know, you don't want to oversaturate that market, platformers with animals. Also, to add insult to injury, the last remaining backup of the game, lead environment artist Keith Gorham said he lent it to a friend, and that was the end of that. Pity. Rattlesnake Red for the PS1 and Saturn. Inspired by Warner Bros. Looney Tunes, this game was cancelled apparently due to being poorly managed, watered down from its ambition, and it was designed by committee, according to lead animator Sonny Strasberg in the December 2000 issue of Electronic Game Monthly on page 176, if you're a magazine collector. From the footage that we have, what we can see is that it's your run-of-the-mill platform game about collecting items and basic combat for killing enemies. Also probably a lot more tank controls. And finally, to end our list of the 50 cancelled PS1 games, we have Malice, a platform game for the Xbox developed by Aronok Games, meant to be released for the PS1 using their Croc 2 engine. It was developed late into the PS1 lifecycle in 1999, with the PS2 out on the market, so the developers thought to repurpose the game for next generation hardware. Showing a tech demo to Microsoft, that was more than enough to get them on board, and they aimed to get it as an Xbox launch title in late 2001. But it was finally 2004 before it was released to mediocre reviews. What's really interesting is that the features that have been cut, such as being able to control a second character, a cat, that was even in the early Xbox versions, but yet it never made it into the final game. And those are the 50 cancelled PS1 games, and certainly more than 10 that you can play right now. I guys hope you... I'm so tired. I've been speaking for like over an hour straight and my ears actually getting sore now and everything. I just want to shut up and keep my mouth quiet. So I'm gonna go, but do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell if you liked the video, and that'll give me an idea if I should make more of these. And drop a comment down below which cancelled game you're gonna play, if you're gonna play any of them, or what did you think about all the cancelled games, and what did you think about what Hasbro did to oh, I'm so tired, I can't even think of the game. I just can't believe what Hasbro did. Why would you do that? Why would you order more of a game? Okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching. Keep well, keep safe wherever you are in the world, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.